Hello, everyone. Thanks for checking out the Indy Handshake Wrestling Podcast. I'm here with the wild card, Jay Spade of Wildkat Sports. How you doing today, Jay?
Man, I'm doing as great as I could possibly be. Just catching up on like a lot of wrestling and stuff like that. Not too much of the current stuff, but watching a lot of old school stuff. So that always kind of puts a smile on my face.
I've been doing that a lot recently, too. I've been going back and watching the old like NWA before it was WCW stuff, like on the network. And yeah, a lot of it's pretty crazy because you start to see like everyone assumes modern indie wrestling or regular wrestling was only this way recently, but there's a lot of stuff you'll see in older wrestling that way ahead of its time.
Oh, definitely. Like a lot of like old Ultimate Dragon matches and stuff like that kind of incorporate the spots that you see now.
Yeah.
So, this really just like reminiscent of like an old Nas lyric, like nothing is original. No idea is original. There's nothing new under the sun. It's not what you do, but it's how it's done. So it's literally just taking something that was old and just repackaging it to something that's brand new.
Yeah, I noticed that watching like Dynamite Kid matches. I was like, this is stuff that dudes pull off now that people flip out about, but this was going on. Or stuff that Great Muta was doing. You know, you see like Stan Hansen chewing tobacco and then just clobbering fools, but then the next match is Great Muta and he's pulling off these crazy back drop kicks and you're like,
Yep. And all that's old school. That's not even new school stuff. So, I mean, those who really kind of like hate the new school now, they're really just incorporating bits and pieces of it from back then.
Yeah. So let's get started with that. As far as you're obviously an independent wrestler, otherwise you wouldn't be on an independent wrestling podcast. But
that is true.
But how did that love first start? Where did you first start going, this is something I want to get into?
Oh, man. Well, honestly, like I'm probably different from a lot of people who's told the story or who's been on the podcast. Like I never liked pro wrestling growing up. My best friend, my neighbor, he used to watch this stuff religiously when we was like around like 7 or 8 years old. And just kind of like for the longest, I would watch and I'd be like, why are you watching this stuff? Like it's dumb. It's not real. It's fake. Like what's the why are you watching? I look at him. He's not even punching him. So what are you getting out of this? And honestly, it wasn't until I got to like middle school, like around 12 years old, I had more friends in like my middle school classes who was into wrestling as well. So it was like second period, they would come in and they would talk about what happened on Monday Night Raw. And I'm just like, hey, y'all watch this stuff too? Like, what's the big deal with this? But it happened like in 2000. And the first match that I kind of watched and that caught my attention was the 2000 Royal Rumble. It was Cactus Jack versus Triple H, the street fight match. And when I saw that match, that's when it clicked. Like it clicked. I understood the premise of it. I understood the story they were trying to tell, and I understood why people enjoyed it. Me looking back at it now, this was no different. Like if I take my childhood, obsessions, which was Mighty Morphin Power Rangers back then, they're doing the same exact stuff, but they're doing it in front of a live audience. There's no cutscenes. There's no sparks coming out of their chest. I mean, these guys, they were bleeding all through in the match and stuff, but it was that. And from that point on, I knew what it was. These guys were basically superheroes. Mm-hmm. And, they was performing, they was doing stunts, and they just did it all in one take on the fly. Once I saw that, I was hooked from go. So really from 2000 until now, I've been like deeply obsessed with wrestling. And, it really just got to the point because I've always stayed in shape all throughout high school. Whenever I was like sad or depressed with stuff, I always had like a weight set. So I always just, lift weights. Just kind of like a good way to get like whatever aggression I had out of me and stuff like that. And roughly, maybe I want to say my junior year or senior year, it got to the point to where, I'm looking on TV, I see guys like, John Cena, I see Eddie Guerrero, I see Rey Mysterio. And I'm like, all right, I'm not that much different than them as far as field. I may not be as tall as them, but I'm in pretty good shape. So it's almost like, how come I shouldn't be able to do this? Why not just try it? And really from that point on, like a junior year or a senior in high school, once I graduated from college, I never let that dream go. And eventually led me into training to be a pro wrestler.
So how did you find out about training? Because I know one thing I remember before I got into the world of independent wrestling was you know, you didn't really know about independent pro wrestling. You know about the WWF at the time, or the WCW or ECW. And then all of a sudden, like when you get into the world of independent wrestling, like this whole world opens up where you're like, oh, there's hundreds of promotions. There's a bunch of different schools. Like, at what point do you learn, like, okay, here's a school, here's where I could train, here's where I could do this?
Well, you know, like honestly, I didn't have too much of an idea. All I knew at that time, like the closest school to me was pretty much Booker T school, and that was in Houston, Texas, Reality of Wrestling. So I was like, all right, cool. When I get done with college, I'll see about, you know, moving out to Houston, getting a job, and then training over there. And man, I don't know at what point it kind of felt weird. I was like, all right, I don't think I could move out to Houston. Let me just look up wrestling schools. I looked up a wrestling school, and the one that came closest to where I stood at, I live a little bit outside of New Orleans in Harvey, Louisiana, was Wildkat Sports. I'm like, all right, never heard of it. Clicked on it, and it kind of gave me a little bit of information as far as like Orlando Jordan being one of the trainers there, and Luke Hawx. And I'm like, well, I know who Orlando Jordan is. I don't know who the hell or what the hell Luke Hawx is. So I'm like, all right, let me look up this guy's name just so I can get some information on who's running the school. I Google his name, and the first thing that pops up is Luke Hawx tried to kill Matt Hardy. And I'm like, wait, who is this guy? So I see the clip. Matt Hardy falls off the top rope, and he's kind of spazzing out on the concrete. And I'm like, all right, so this dude's a bit psycho. But it's a wrestling school, so you know, let me just see, you know. So just kind of like from there, I sent out emails and stuff like that. And in hindsight now, I realize how unhelpful Luke Hawx was. It's like, yo, because like I'm trying to find out, like, all right, cool. If I'm gonna do this, make sure I have everything straight. I already went to college, so I got like my bachelor's degree in business management, just in case I need something to fall back on. I'm like, well, hey, look, I'm looking to join. I want to know, like, if any chance y'all know any health insurance companies I can, you know, apply for and stuff like that. I just want to make sure I take care of myself. And he responds back, nah, don't have no idea. Can't help you out with that. But, you know, you can stop by the school and take a look at it, and, you know, this is how much you got to pay. I'm like, damn, this dude is really not helpful at all.
Little blunt. Luke's a little blunt sometimes.
Yeah, and this is coming through like emails. So I'm like, all right, well, I mean, look, are you trying to help me join or what? But, you know, I got to the point like I went over there and I checked out the scene of them doing their practice sessions, you know, before joining. And, you know, I just kind of got hooked from there. Like I was a bit nervous, you know, going into it, but, you know, I got my stuff in order. And then like when they would say, well, this is how much the down payment is, I'm like, cool, I'm ready. Kind of like I've been ready, but I had to wait like a few weeks before he had enough for a full class.
Yeah. So now you're joining, now you're training. Obviously physically you're already kind of there, you know, but what's the first wall you hit when you start training wrestling? What's the thing where you go, oh, this part is harder than I thought this would be. I didn't think it was going to be like this.
Man. Yeah, that's a bit weird. Okay. So and I don't want to make this seem like I know what I'm doing or like I built myself up to like really handle this stuff. But I kind of feel like I was the most prepared for wrestling training coming into Wildcat. Besides, another guy who came after me was like Edgin Stone. Really probably him. And the reason why that is because before I even started training, you know, we try to find as much as we can about the business. I used to watch Tough Enough. And one of the things I saw on Tough Enough, I don't know if this was the first episode, this might have been like the first episode of any season, is when they put them through conditioning, everybody was like dying, or they were throwing up, or they were passing out. And I'm looking at that stuff like, no, like I hate throwing up. I hate it. So there's no way I'm going to get myself in a condition to where I'm going to go and do all this stuff and I'm going to be throwing up in the ring or throwing up everywhere. I hate that feeling with a passion. So even before going and doing the training, I was upping up my cardio just so that they could never get me to that point to where I'm throwing up and I can't get through the workouts. And even for like, you know, just for the hell of it, me and my friend, like we used to like play wrestle in our living room. So there's been a time where he picked me up and rock bottomed me like on our floor. So I was like, all right, cool. If I can get slammed on the floor and not hurt myself, I'm more than sure I can take a bump. So when I actually like got into the ring and I took like that first bump, it was nothing because I expected it to be extremely much harder than what it was. Like when I got to that point, I was like, all right, well, this is good. I can take this. And the condition is nothing because I've been training myself for it. Maybe the actual wall that I had to hit was really just me kind of getting out of my shell and being a little bit more vocal and stuff like that, which that honestly did not come until really once I was already in the ring and doing shows, just because physically I looked good. I was athletic enough to kind of pick up on the moves and perform them well. My conditioning was great. So it was almost like, all right, whenever we get the chance, let's put this guy in the match because he could perform well. But, in order to show more character and be more vocal and loud, I wasn't like a shy person. So it's almost like when they used to put me in front of the camera, it's like, oh, now y'all want me to perform on command? That's a bit hard for me to do. But once I got past that point, and honestly, that probably took like a good maybe like 2 or 3 years. And, it's something I'm still working on now, but mentally in my mind, what I had to do, and excuse my language, I had to stop giving a fuck about certain things.
Yep.
And just let it happen. Just let it go.
No, there's a whole lot of, like, okay, I noticed when you wrestle, one thing I notice is your facial expressions are great. Like you're selling. When you sell, you're selling. And I know you're not really hurt because I know it's a work, but like, I'm like, you're making me believe that you're hurt right now. And that's one thing I noticed a lot of guys who are super green, like they'll take stuff and they're kind of like the whole match. And like, you're not even like, you're not making it look like you're hurt. You know what I mean? So there's like, even like little things like that. It takes a while. I would imagine, I don't know. I would imagine it gets it's something it takes a while to get used to. Cause you're basically on the whole time. You're not only being physically active, you're acting the entire time as well.
Yeah, like honestly, what I always try to keep in my mind is not as soon as you hit the curtains, but before going out and going through the curtains, you're in character. I don't break character until like a minute after I go through the curtains after the match. So the bell is already rung, the match is over, I'm walking to the back. There's a bunch of people who will come up to me like, man, are you okay? Are you okay? And I'll still be selling because I'm still in character. And then every now and then, like, I'll just snap out of it. Oh, yeah, I'm good. Like I'm just straight. But I always try to stay in character no matter what. Of course, accidents are going to happen or things don't go according to plan. But as part of improv is to react as your character would. So, I mean, even if you're like doing this was like an improv comedy show and I'm impersonating, let's say, Donald Trump. If a gunshot goes off, I got to react to that as Donald Trump would. Always got to just stay in character regardless of what the case is. And it's the same thing with selling too. A lot of people can do it because they can keep themselves invested in their character no matter what happens during the spot. Some people can. It's just a lot harder for them to stay in character because they forget that, oh, snap. It's not about the move. It's about the wrestler doing the move or taking the move. It's not about me performing,
Did that come easily to you in the beginning, or did it take a while to learn? Because that's the one thing I noticed when I go back and I watch old matches is I used to just appreciate the person doing the move. And then now as I go back and watch, I appreciate the people taking the move sometimes way more.
It was a bit of it was kind of like different levels that I had initially coming into it. I would say I was good at it, solid. No, excuse me. And then once I had my injury, I had a torn meniscus, so I kind of had some time off. And one of the things I wanted to get back into, besides like doing moves and stuff like that, was focusing on selling, just having different ways of selling the same move, differently, regardless of what the match is. And that's something that I teach the students at Wildkat Sports. There's probably going to be on a show, you're going to probably have about maybe like 20 suplexes. How can you sell your suplex differently from the previous match, or differently the match that's coming after yours? So really after my injury, I started putting more focus on, let me try to sell stuff in a way to where it seems more brutal. And then also let me sell my moves to be more animated. Sometimes, depending on what the story is, I may sell stuff in a comedic way to try to get a a funny reaction out of the crowd. Or I may do it like in a different way to get like a disturbing reaction out of the crowd. It's all about like the emotion and trying to pull from the crowd and stuff like that. But I started off initially, I would say solid. Once after I had my injury and I had some time to kind of sit down and evaluate things, I kind of took it up to the next level after that.
And how about the whole psychology of, being in the ring? Did match psychology and everything come pretty easily as well, or did that take some time?
Man, the match psychology. All right, I want to say all that happened. Really, it's weird, but it goes back to that injury I had. So the injury I had was a torn meniscus, and up until that point, I forgot how many years I was already wrestling, but I was still fairly new. And when I had my injury, I was out for roughly about 3 to 4 months. And when I came back and I started a feud with Matt Lancey. That's pretty much one of the head trainers at Wildkat Sports. He had just came back from a knee injury himself. So the thing is that literally he came back and I came back at the same time, and he hit me up and he was like, hey, look, Luke doesn't have anything for us. Do you want to do a rivalry, basically almost like a best of 5 series? And I was like, cool, let's go with it. Us doing that feud, it really took my skills as an in-ring performer to another level. He's much wiser than me, and he's had more years than I had. But Matt also gave me like the freedom to kind of have a little bit of control in our matches, more input than what I had before with other guys who I wrestled with. So it was almost like when we were done, we did a best of 5, and then pretty much it led to 2 more additional matches. And the final match being an Iron Man match. So we put all this stuff together and really performing with him, like each and every single show, all of our matches felt extremely different. It gave me more confidence, and it made me go into the matches with a different mindset. He also let me be a lot more creative. So I was able to play with the ring psychology a lot more. And I think after that feud is really what kind of like made me a much better performer as far as selling, as far as ring psychology, really just as far as confidence too in general. That's when I kind of like hit that next level as far as, all right, I understand. It's almost like I can kind of see through the matrix now, and I can understand how to play with the crowd's emotions, how to get them invested into it, how to get them to really get invested into me. Because we were both baby faces at that time. And literally at that point, I was fairly new, and he was already established. He had already been a champion. So the crowd knew him. It was just getting to know me. And at the end of our Iron Man match, I think both of us, pretty much I kind of got up to his level. And I wasn't looked at that rookie status anymore.
Yeah, so it sounds like what you needed was like one focal point so that you can concentrate and like see the ebbs and flows of a story because you had this one like goal in mind.
Yeah, like, I would, and I always say like anybody, if we're talking about as far as like wrestling and the type of matches that I like, as much as, if you put me in a spot fest match where like we're just doing a whole bunch of spots, I'm cool with that. But me, I love storytelling. Give me like a nice solid feud to sink my teeth into where I can give you like multiple matches with the same person, but they all feel differently. I love that. I love storytelling more than anything. And, my career, my stint at Wildkat Sports, that's all I basically had. I never really had a period to where I wasn't invested in some type of feud.
And how did you find, you said now you're helping to train people as well?
Yeah. Yes.
So
yes.
How has that been as far as the challenge? Going from, someone who had a dream, went into the business, and now you're there. Now you're dealing with a bunch of kids who have the same dream. And how frustrating can it be sometimes?
Like, honestly, I didn't ask for this, not at all. I really did not. This was something that Luke Hawx thought was needed. I did not think so. But, it's weird. I don't want to come off, I'm going to try to be as real as I can. I don't want to come off as disingenuous, but I'm there to help everybody succeed. I want to see everybody succeed. I want to see everybody get money, get their gimmick over and stuff like that. But at the same exact time, I do not let those who are trailing behind or anything like that really mess up my psyche. So me going into there, like, you'll get some guys who don't work out. I'm like, all right, I'll put you in the ring and you hurt yourself or you hurt somebody else. How you going to feel after that? Oh, they're going to feel guilty. They're going to feel sorry. Yeah, you feel sorry, but you just hurt somebody or you just hurt yourself. So now you can't, perform either. So I need you to start working out. I need you to get yourself together. At one point, and we have other coaches too, like Matt Lancey, he's one of the coaches. Danny Flamingo, he's another coach, and they all kind of like bring in different aspects as far as how they interact with the students. Of course, you got you gotta have like the good cop and the bad cop. So, for instance, Danny is kind of one of the bad cops because he doesn't mind yelling. Like if somebody messes up, he's on them. He's he's on them. He's yelling at them and stuff like he's really getting into them because you have certain rules you got to follow and they're not following it. My approach is more laid back. I'm not going to let any student upset me. It's like, hey, if you're messing up, you got to do it again. Or you're messing up, get out the ring. I'm here to help y'all, but a lot of times I can't let y'all just run amok, and I'm not going to let y'all upset me and have me get angry and start yelling and stuff. So I have a more laid back approach to it. But it is definitely a challenge because it's one thing for me to critique myself, but it's another thing to critique somebody else and then have to give them a way to improve upon their performance and breaking it down to them to where they can understand it. Because I can only understand my language, but if I got to translate it to somebody else, that's where the challenge comes in at.
Yeah, I can imagine. And also, like, you say it's a laid back style, but it's at the same time, it's kind of like they can't waste other people's time as well. If somebody's not trying to improve themselves and they're holding the rest of the class back because they're not, giving a shit, basically, it's kind of like, well, that's not fair to everyone else as well. So
yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, I tell anybody who comes in like, wrestling is not easy. I remember somebody told me this stuff was easy. And I was like, dude, I'm kind of picking up on it good, but it ain't that easy. Like, like chill out on it. It's not the easiest thing to do. But I tell any of the students, hey, look, it's a challenge. If you love a challenge, you can succeed at it. But you have to love a challenge. And sometimes you're going to constantly fail at challenges, but you got to keep going. But, it's also one of those things to where it's like, if you look at like some of the old stories, like I think when Chris Jericho first started wrestling, he mentioned that his class was like maybe 12 people. And then toward the end of it, it was like a handful, like maybe 3 or 4 who actually completed it. So me knowing that, I know whenever we do get a new group in, I don't think they're all going to stay. The hard work and the challenge of wrestling is going to weed out the ones who can't keep up. And so, you have like a good handful to where you'd be like, all right, I saw some potential in this guy and he's kind of living up to it because he's still here. And, some of the other ones, it's like, hey, look, y'all are trying, but you just can't pick up on it. So, I'm here to help, but, y'all got to do more work outside of practice. That's really like the thing that holds a lot of people back is being able to do more work outside of practice. Because they think like, hey, we come here for these 3 hours, let's work hard here. And then when you go home, you're not doing anything. If this is what you really want, you want to be a top guy, you want to be in the main event, you want to be on the show, you want to be on the posters, you got to put in work outside of practice.
Well, it reminds me of, it's not exactly a direct correlation, but it reminds me of playing in a band. Like we would practice a couple times a week and you can't not pick up your guitar 5 days out of the week and then 2 days out of the week show up and be like, hey, let's play some songs. Like,
yeah,
you have to do some stuff at home. You can't, training goes, you have to train all the time. You don't master anything by half-assing it that way.
Well, yeah. And that's what it's really, if you're a musician, if you're a performer, a pro wrestler, or athlete, it's a lifestyle that you have to adapt to. And you have to, you have to be fully invested into this new lifestyle. Some people can do it. And some people are like, well, you know what? I'm still accustomed to my old way of living. So, I don't want to switch and change over to that yet. And, some people are willing to make that sacrifice. Some aren't. But if you want to be a master at any craft, man, you got to put like time in. It's a requirement.
So let's go and shift gears here to the social aspect of pro wrestling. You always hear a lot of stories, locker room stories, people, the way you're supposed to act with professionals. You know what I mean? There's a whole lot of, people showing up at different locker rooms through different countries or different areas of the country where some people have more old school feel, where you gotta, get in, shut up. You can't talk to the veterans. You gotta, kind of that kind of thing, where you have to make sure you say hi to everyone, which is something that you have to do. How was that stuff in the beginning for you, as far as learning to kind of navigate the social aspect of that?
Man, okay. This kind of goes back to what I was saying with Tough Enough and stuff. So me trying to get into the business, I researched the business. And I remember that story. Oh man, who was that dude? He told a story, and this was after WCW had already closed up and WWE purchased a bunch of wrestlers from WCW. And it was somebody, I don't know if Raven was a part of it or whatnot, but it was some new guy. He came in, and pretty much he was from WCW, but he was going into WWE. They had just signed him and stuff. And he was kind of like going into the locker room and then going into catering. And one person kept bringing up, oh man, you didn't speak to Triple H. Oh man, you didn't speak to Undertaker. Oh man, they're really not going to like that stuff now. Like, you done messed up now and stuff like that. And when I read it, I was like, yo, you really got to like talk in Greek to everybody when you go to a locker room, because you don't want any heat. And the guy was like, he got like a lot of heat and he didn't really realize. So he was like, well, I didn't even see them there. So I didn't even know I had to speak to them and stuff like that. So me having that in my head, I was like, all right, if I see anybody, look around the locker room, make sure I introduce myself and, and greet them and stuff like that. So me kind of having that fear of not wanting to be kicked out and disowned in the locker room, I've always had like, the utmost respect for anybody there. I always kept to myself. And basically whenever I did travel though, I always traveled with either, Luke, Matt, some of the OGs of Wildkat Sports. Very rarely in my career early on did I like venture out alone. But I've always remembered that in the back of my head, like, hey, if I go to any locker room, make sure I introduce myself to everybody. So I haven't had any personal like backlash and stuff like that whenever entering the locker room. Luke, on the other hand, yeah, he's somebody completely, he's different. Then again, he has like, the tenure to do stuff like that. But me personally, I've never gotten into that. Regardless of if I know the person or not, I introduce myself. Or if we're kind of like, if they look like they're busy, I'll do like the wave or stuff, but I always make sure I acknowledge somebody. But I've never ran into any type of problems because I'm not trying to get kicked out of no locker room.
Yeah. How about for Wildcat? You got a lot of people who come in from different promotions that come and work for you guys. Has there ever been situations where people show up and they obviously don't understand that?
Yeah. No, because honestly, Luke does a good job of not booking anybody who's disrespectful like that.
Okay.
So, I mean, for the most part, and if you saw his interview, he mentioned a guy who was like smoking weed and stuff like that. Like even that guy who did do that, he still showed up and greet everybody. Like he was still nice and friendly. He got out of pocket. He crossed the line and stuff. But no, Luke always does like a good job of putting people who he knows is respectful and hardworking in a position to work for us. So I can't even say we ran into anybody like that. I mean, I've seen somebody get kicked out of a locker room at one of Booker T's shows. That was pretty funny. But that wasn't really because of locker room etiquette. That was because he did something in the match that he was not supposed to. And yeah, Booker wasn't having that. He told him go.
What did he do?
The guy out. I think he did something outside of the ring during the match. And I don't think it was called for. Because the way they run stuff at ROW is very strict. And all the matches are discussed beforehand. They have agents pretty much for the matches. And for that guy to do that, and if he've already had a conversation with Booker, you're pretty much going against what the head booker, no pun intended, told you to do. So I just remember like after the match, Booker like just so like, get out of here. Like I told you not to do that stuff, not to do. The guy didn't even get changed. Like he left in his gear.
Dang.
So I'll show you right there. Like, hey, he was a nice, courteous guy, but if you're talking to the booker and the booker wants to do something, this is something I told my students too. You have to follow directions. If I tell you to cut a certain promo, certain amount of time, you go over that time, or you don't incorporate none of the elements I told you to do in the instructions, you're not going to get booked like that. You're going to get kicked off the show, kicked out of the locker room for not following directions.
Yeah, I mean, you can't show up to a movie set and then have them be like, "Hey, Robert Downey Jr., you're Iron Man." He's like, "Well, I'm gonna be Batman in this movie." It's like, that's not the way this works, man. Like, you signed up for this. Like, we're paying you to do this.
Yes, stick to the script. Like, stick to it. It's not your show. It's a booker's show. Yeah. So you gotta go by their rules, or just don't wrestle for them.
So what about going and wrestling for different promotions? What did you think about that as far as, you were at Wildcat, you trained at Wildcat, you stayed at Wildcat, you're still a Wildcat. So like you stayed at one space for a while and then, you start branching out doing different stuff. What did you notice was different the first time you did that?
I mean, this is no slight at nobody at all, but it's pretty actual. Really the crowd size. That was the biggest thing. I tell our students all the time, and really a lot of them don't know because they haven't ventured out yet, but when it comes to crowds, Wildkat Sports has like the biggest crowds I've ever wrestled for. I've done shows in LA, I've done shows in Texas, done shows in New York, I did shows in Philly, did shows in Florida too. Nobody draws a crowd like Wildkat Sports. And the weirdest thing is we may not be that much well known when it comes to, nationwide, like a little bit of buzz, but not that big of a buzz. But like when we're drawing on a low show, we're drawing like 700 to 800 people. And I go do a show in Texas, and the show in Texas roughly has like 200. Or, I go and do a show like when I did the Bumps and Bruises show, that show probably had at the most maybe 400. But Wildkat Sports, like we pull 700 to 800 on a normal. Our down show, I remember we had Stevie Ray at one of our shows, and this was a bad crowd for us. Stevie Ray looked in the audience and he was like, "Luke is upset with this crowd?" I'm like, man, I would love to have a crowd like this at ROW. Like, I'll be straight with this. And it was like, we just have such a high standard. We love bringing in, as much people as possible. So that was the biggest shock to me. And it was like, okay, I got to get used to working, smaller crowds and stuff like that, which I did a little bit because I did some shows in Mississippi, and a good chunk of their shows and their crowds was roughly like maybe like 100 and something people and whatnot. But that was the biggest shock. It's like, okay, Wildcat, I'm so used to like the big crowds. When I go somewhere else, I can't have that high expectations all the time. In addition to that is also just kind of like having our state athletic commission. Pretty much we have it regulated to where like you need a wrestler's license, you got to have blood work done. So everything is regulated in Louisiana. You go out to Florida, no commission,
nope.
No regulations. Go to LA, no commissions, no regulations. Same thing in Texas. So it's a bit of a culture shock. It's like, okay, cool. It's different times. So that was also another thing too. And just, in addition to the crowd, it's just kind of like how people are invested into the crowds. I just noticed with Wildcat, we are more story-based. I did some shows in Brooklyn and in Long Island, and the crowd was extremely hard to work. Granted, they didn't know me at the time, but it was like first starting off the match, it's like, all right, nobody kind of cares. Even though I'm a babyface, nobody cares about me. I got to do more to get the crowd invested into it. And so that's another challenge too, that you just got to try to figure out on the fly. I can't practice for that. I only can be in front of that crowd and practice and execute and learn in that moment.
Yeah, that actually just reminds me of earlier today, I was watching an old WCW event, and it was Conan versus Eddie Guerrero. And this is like early in Eddie Guerrero's career in WCW.
Yeah.
And Conan still has the colorful outfit on, like, and they're like performing in Mississippi or something. So they start off the match doing some awesome lucha shit, like stuff you're like, this is great. But the crowd gives zero shits.
Yes.
And you could kind of tell, like, Conan kind of like looks around and he's like, all right. So he starts hyping the crowd up, and then he starts hitting a lot more fast paced moves out of nowhere. And then the crowd starts getting into it. And I'm like, this dude, like, this is like, that's a veteran right there. Like on the fly, he's like, okay, how am I going to fix this? How am I going to change the outcome right now? And he just does it. And that just reminded me of that, where you're like, you have to kind of like you mentioned earlier, improv it where you're like, okay,
Yes.
how can I adapt this match to the crowd that I'm at right now?
Yeah, and honestly, kind of like one of the things I learned, another bump in my skill level, if you would say, was like when I did some shows in England, working with WAW, which is Paige's family wrestling promotion. They did a lot of shows that was kind of like catered to the audience or catered to families. So there's way more interactions with the audience. And that kind of like, even though we have a skeleton of a match in our head, at any point, if we see something almost like a prop that we can play with, like if there's an audience member that we can play with, we'll go out and we'll do that. So we'll incorporate that audience member into the match, whether it's, heckling the audience member or even grabbing a guy, going outside the ring and having the audience member chop him. It'll be something as good as that to get the crowd invested into it. And we don't call it in the back, but it's kind of one of those things like, you call on the fly inside the ring and then, we just go with it. But that's another thing too, is like, it was a way different crowd that I had to learn how to work in front of. And I even still use that today, depending on if the crowd is dead or not.
Yeah, I noticed, because, I've been to a few Wildcat shows, and I've noticed the crowd is very into it, and they're very interactive as far as when you guys enter and exit the ring. They're very animated. So you got big crowds, they're invested, and you don't need to give away all the Wildcat secrets. But, what makes Wildcat different, do you think, that is the reason why you have such a dedicated fan base?
It's one of those, I guess you could say it's like a grassroots type band. If you had to kind of compare this to like, music in a sense. So like you see like this band, they start off at this small indie type level, doing shows that start off at like, 100 people and stuff like that. But then you slowly see that they're getting a buzz. They're getting a little bit bigger and bigger, but they're still local. So, instead of performing in front of bars, they're now performing in front of like, House of Blues type venues. But it's also the combination of that. And a lot of our wrestlers are from the community. So, at any time you'll see one guy, he'll have his family there. His family has, his family's filled with maybe like 30 people. And those 30 people come to a show and then they see other wrestlers that they like. So it's to me, it feels almost more like a family reunion in a sense. Because if you look at everybody's there, they're pretty much local guys. Like these are guys who train, like our students are local guys. They train within the state of Louisiana. So, you got people coming from Baton Rouge, people coming from Houma, people coming from Lafayette, people coming from New Orleans, Harvey, Kenner, all that stuff. And they're pretty much coming there with their families, along with regular wrestling fans who just so happens to see this. And I'm like, oh man, this stuff isn't crap. It's actually great top quality wrestling. Yeah, the presentation may not be big with the pyro and the laser lights and all that stuff, but it's quality entertainment. So since we kind of have like, our families coming together to support us, to me, it feels more like a family reunion as opposed to just a wrestling promotion bringing in fans.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, especially the whole idea of you kind of, I know for me, if I hear wrestlers from the Bay Area and from California, I'm like, dope. Like I'm immediately like, awesome. Or, you know what I mean? Like so when you go to a show and you see people like grew up where you grew up, it's kind of like, okay, I'm going to get behind this guy because you relate to them. You feel like we've had a shared experience, and that's kind of, not to get too touchy feely on a wrestling podcast, but that's, that's really what it's all about, right? You kind of go in there, you empathize with certain characters, you hate other characters, and that's kind of what you're going for.
I mean, you still gotta have that emotional connection, and that's really like, it's like anybody who support, we'll just say somebody like a Buku Dao. If you follow Buku Dao's career, he started off doing referee work. So it's great to see somebody who started off doing the referee, and then he's finally in the ring, and then he's winning titles and stuff like that. You watch their progression, you watch their journey. I started off doing security. There's literally a photo you can find of me working security, pulling Matt Lancey off of somebody. And then like you fast forward to like 4 years later, we're doing like an Iron Man match. We're fighting against each other. So you see that progression and you get invested in not only that character, but that person.
And did part of you at that moment, thinking back, go, man, I got a bachelor's degree and I got to be a security guard right now?
No, not at all. Wait, like I told you, I I was afraid of messing up in this business. So I always looked that stuff up, and that was one of the things that they said, hey, you're going to start out doing security.
Yeah.
So I already knew that from the get-go. I had no problem with that. The only thing I was able to avoid, and like if you speak to any of our other guys who kind of like coming up in training, normally you start off as a referee. So normally you do security, then referee, then you wrestle. To my benefit, I made sure I looked good enough to where they could never put me as a referee, which is weird because I actually got a referee offer. I don't know if anybody has ever told you this, but it was weird. So I didn't do any refereeing in Wildcat Sports at all. I looked too good. Fast forward into doing some practice matches for WWE. I actually got offered a referee contract. I was like, man, I've been working out to make sure I don't look like a referee, and I didn't want to offer me a referee contract. But nah, like if you look at through the progressions, I was like, cool. If I gotta do security, no problem. If I had to do refereeing, I would do it. But Luke looked at me. He was like, there's no way I can put you in a referee outfit, and because you look like you could whip somebody's ass. So why would I do that?
Yeah, it doesn't play well if a wrestler comes in who, let's say, doesn't have as good of a body type, and you're like, man, the referee's more cut than this dude. How are we supposed to believe this guy's whooping anyone's ass right
now? Which is the truth.
Yeah. So, you know, I know it's an Indy Handshake. It's an indie wrestling podcast called the Indy Handshake, but so tryouts for WWE and stuff like that. How does that come about? What is your mindset? What is it like to go through that process?
All right. Well, technically, I never had a tryout per se with them. It's weird because they kind of they have like different levels of tryouts. So whenever they come in town, they always look for local talent to use as extras, for like their movie and their performance and stuff. So normally before a show happens, I don't know if they really do this for scouting talent or if they do this for shits and giggles. I'm still trying to figure this out. But they have the wrestlers put on matches. And the matches that we do are pretty much the matches that you are currently seeing now, in front of no crowd at all. The crowd would be maybe the agents, the referees, and whatever wrestlers are ringside just talking and just waiting for the show to start or something. So you're literally in there, you're wrestling, let's say a group of 8 guys from Wildcat are used as extras. So we have to wrestle each other. It's basically like a 5 to 6 minute match, and there's no crowd. Nobody's paying attention to you at all. So there's literally no energy. So, every time I've been there, I put on a practice match. I'm always confident with my stuff. And, Luke always gets good feedback from them, but he doesn't really get like enough feedback, at least in regards to me. There's never enough feedback to where it's like, hey, look, we really like this guy. Let's bring him down. It's almost like, man, y'all did a great job. We'll see y'all next year or some stuff like that. But
you're like, why can't you tell me the little part that I need to do?
Yeah, it's like, it's weird because I'll tell you one thing. There was this was when the Ascension was like just demolishing people. And I had did a practice match. Everybody went through all their practice matches and stuff. I forgot who I wrestled. I think I might have wrestled no, it wasn't Vukudao. That was another time. I forgot who I wrestled. But the guy came up afterwards and he asked Luke, hey, who are some of the guys who I highly recommend to wrestle the Ascension? And so he picked Vukudao, and then he picked me. And like Road Dogg, he was working with him at the time. He was like, nah, we can't use that dude. That dude's too jacked, man. Look at that stuff. Ain't nobody gonna believe that the Ascension can like easily just toss him around the ring. So they had this other wrestler who was chubby, a bit more out of shape. It was like, him? Oh, he's good. We can use him. He looks great. We could beat him up and stuff like that. But, it's kind of like one of those things where it's like, all right, it would have been good to be on TV and I guess get squashed by the Ascension. But, you look too good to be able to do that. But those are kind of like the talks that happens on those show days and stuff. But, we had like a few guys. If y'all get Vukudao on the show, he's another guy who had some tryouts with WWE. Edrin Stone, he's another guy who has tryouts for WWE as well. Luke is always up there every, about 6 months, prior to like the pandemic. he was up there for like a good bit, helping them train and stuff like that. So, hey, maybe my time is going to come at some point. I still do enjoy being backstage, eating catering, and I guess just doing practice matches in front of like 10 people. So.
That's what my other guest, Jason Stiles, said. He said the catering there is the greatest thing ever.
Yes, the catering. The only thing, that's weird about it is like until you can do that practice match, with normally when they used to have SmackDowns on Tuesdays, it was like cool. So we're booked for Monday Night Raw and Tuesday Night SmackDown. So you would eat a little bit on Monday, but then on Tuesday you would be like, all right, let's not eat enough. Let's not eat too much. Get the practice match over with, and then we can dig into the desserts and stuff right after the match. So that's the only thing that kind of sucks now is because SmackDown is now on Fridays, so stuff is weird now as far as constant bookings.
Wow. How the irony in the pro wrestling business to be like, nah, you're too jacked right now. Sorry, we can't use you. You're like, I thought this is what I needed to do.
Yeah, the only thing that kind of came good out of one time was I did do a 205 live match with Mustafa Ali, and which was weird because I kind of barely just made that because it was like, well, hey, are you how much you weigh? And I was like, I'm like around 203, 204. It was like, oh, because like they're gonna put you on a scale, so you gotta definitely be like 205 or under in order for you to like do this match for us and stuff. So, like, if anybody, I have it on my YouTube channel. If anybody look it up, we have like a very quick, brief, maybe like 2-minute match and stuff like that. But I mean, even me getting that actual match was kind of depending on like how I look and stuff. Because I mean, really, the guys that they had lined up, it was me, PJ Hawx, and Buku Dao. And it was just weird because like they looked at PJ Hawx and it was like, yeah, man, you just look way too nice. We can't use you. You look way too. You look too much. You look too much like a baby face. And then like they looked at Buku Dao, and I don't know what was going through his mind. He had a weird look on his face, like he was trying to be mean, but it came across like he was like, and I'm like, and then looked at him like, no, we're not using. And so they looked at me a lot. They was like, all right, well, you look like you can play a heel, so we'll use you for the match. But I mean, that was a fun match, fun and simple.
And when you do that, are you just like, okay, do you talk to the worker that you're going with and say, okay, you got to call the match, basically?
No. With them, everything is completely structured. So I mean, it's great. There's no room for improv because you have a set amount of time. So Mustafa, he came and got me. We went over the match, everything he wanted to do. And then we went over again with the agent. And, from there, that was it. But I had no input.
Yeah.
Which was cool because I'm nobody in the grand scheme of that company.
I guess, to look at the positive, that kind of takes pressure off because you're like, this is what we're doing? Okay. I'll do that to the best of my ability. But if you don't like it, that's not on me.
It's on you. Like if they go over in time, like that's all on them. It's like I had nothing to say in this. I had no say. I just followed instructions.
Yeah. Oh man. How about for guys that come in, or when you're working with guys that used to be on WWE, ECW, WCW? Did you get weirded out, like thinking like, oh man, I used to work with, you got into wrestling watching Cactus Jack versus Triple H, and now you're like, oh, now I'm on shows with Tommy Dreamer. Like, what a trip this is.
It's man, I don't. Okay, so this is kind of like something that I do to psych myself out. Well, psych myself up. I always make sure, and this is weird, but in order for me to perform, I tell myself I'm the baddest motherfucker on the planet. Like, there's nobody who can fuck with me. I tell myself that just so I don't get scared when I go in front of the crowd and I'm performing, and I don't get stage fright. So with me having that in my mind, I always look at the performers who I'm on the show with, like we're on the same level. That way I don't get starstruck where I feel like, damn, I shouldn't even be in the ring with them because I can't do anything. I haven't done anything yet in my career to match this. So I don't tend to get starstruck about, the people that I meet. I'm more humbled afterwards when they, say, "Hey, man, you did a good job, but that was real solid," and stuff like that. Like I did a really good program in feud with Stevie Richards, and I had no nervousness going into the feud that we had. Actually, he was kind enough to let me win the belt from him, and he was a different style of working because Stevie, he likes to call a lot of stuff on the fly. He'll be like, "Hey, we got the finish. That's all we need. Maybe a comeback. You let me know what your comeback is." But a lot of stuff is going to be on the fly. So, when I got into it, with him doing the matches and stuff like that, it was just a lot of talking. Hey, do this, do that, and that's also another point where I kind of felt like I reached a new level because up until that point, I didn't have too many guys who like to call stuff on the fly. We would do it at practice, but in front of a crowd, we really didn't do much. We didn't do that often. So wrestling him and, we did a feud and our blow off match was a hardcore match. And kind of like after the match went good, he texted me, he was like, "Hey man, that was like a really good match. I had like a lot of fun." And me, even though I feel like I can't be fucked with, I'm the baddest motherfucker on the planet, it just felt it was real humbling for him to come and reach out to me afterwards and be like, "Hey, great performance, great job. I really I felt safe and I really enjoyed the match." So one of those things that kind of like, all right, I didn't expect this, but it feels good to get that type of reinforcement as far as like, "Hey, you're doing your job right. Keep it going." So, but even like meeting guys like when I met Tommy Dreamer and stuff like that, even Dreamer told me like, "Hey, dude, you got like a shit ton of potential. Like, just keep it going. Try to make sure you're making, the right decisions and stuff." And it was weird because I think it was at the show when we had our X-rated show with Dreamer there. Our match, even though I was champion at the time, my championship match was before the main event. I think it was like before intermission. And I didn't understand it, but hey, I'm not the booker. It is what it is. Let it roll. But I think Tommy, he was in the main event. After the show, he kind of like, he just sat there and he was like, "Man, you know what? Y'all should have been the main event." He said, "Honestly, like the crowd loves you." I was wrestling Danny Flamingo at the time. He was like, "The crowd loves y'all. Honestly, y'all should have been the main event, and you going over, the crowd still loved it." So there's no reason why his four-way match should have been the main event when I'm the champion. So it's kind of hearing things like that. It's like, all right, I felt the same way too. And you're kind of, just like reinforcing, what I'm saying. But it's good. It's always a good feeling to kind of have that reinforcement from veterans.
Oh, absolutely. People who have, years in the business and they know, and also have no reason to bullshit you. That's the other thing. Like,
yeah.
They're, they have nothing to gain from lying to you. So it's kind of like,
I can't get them booked. So
yeah, exactly. So, hey, so, when they're saying stuff, they're genuine. No, Tommy Dreamers especially is a really nice dude. I met him at I went to C2E2 in Chicago and he was just there, with a booth, like, and I was just bullshitting with him. Of course I name drop Luke because that's what I always do. I'm like, "Oh yeah, I saw you at the Wildcat show. Yeah, I know Luke. Anyway, so what's going on?" And then, no, but he was super cool. We were just like bullshitting about like random like wrestling stuff, like the Lucha Brothers and stuff like that. Like, he's just a really cool dude to talk to.
Yes.
So that's got to be kind of refreshing when you do meet guys that are like in the business and you're like, "Oh, they're actually kind of nice. That's good." Any guys you meet, and like I said, no names have to be necessary. Any guys you meet where you're like, "This dude's not so nice."
Man, I'm trying to actually think. Man, who was somebody who just wasn't nice? It's where I have low expectations of people. I'm kind of one of those guys where it's like, I don't expect you to be nice to me. Like, I expect you to be cordial, but I don't expect you to be nice. Like, go out of your way to do things for me. So when somebody actually does that stuff, it's a bit surprising, even though some people consider it common courtesy. But yeah, I never really had anybody who was like just mean spirited or anything like that. Maybe some guys who just weren't as talkative. It's almost like they did the match and that was it. Like, that's all they wanted. Just, all right, we did our match, cool. Peace out, guy. Or they don't really want to like chat it up on some personal stuff or just casual conversation. But I haven't, and granted, I have a very short career. I have not had anybody come at me like sideways or anything like that.
Okay. Anyone work a little snug?
Damn, anybody work snug? No, no, nobody who works snug. I'll tell you one thing. And this was due to inexperience. Uh, I I did stiff somebody unintentionally during this was like one of my this might have been maybe like my I don't want to say six, maybe like my 10th match. But and I felt bad about it afterwards, but I didn't know any better, and it was just kind of like one of the growing pains and stuff like that. But I was wrestling Ricky Starks. Ricky Starks he was Wildcat had booked him like in the beginning of his career and stuff. So me and Luke put me and him together in a match, and yo, this was like right after my shine, and I don't know what I was thinking. Really, I don't think I was thinking in general. But I did my shine, and I'm kind of giving him a little bit of heat, just giving him a few strikes. And, like, I kicked him, and I think I legit kicked him. Like, I kind of had my toe pointed, and it hit his side. And I didn't realize – at first I thought he was selling. But when I heard him curse, he was like, oh, fuck. I was like, I don't think you're supposed to say that. But like I don't think the camera was really on my face. I was like, I don't think he was supposed to say that. And he said something like, "Oh, you fucked up." And the thing is that during the match, I was like, "Oh shit, I think I really stiffed him." So I was like, "All right, do what you got to do, man. Like I'm expecting a receipt or something." And I don't want to say that he didn't do it because we have like a opening to our television show. And he does like, he set me up in a corner and I'm on the middle turnbuckle. My face is like leaning on the middle turnbuckle. So I'm kind of like on one knee. And he like runs and he jumps in the air and he like does a drop kick on my back. And you can kind of see my back bend in like that and stuff. And it looks great. I don't know if that is the stiff shot that he meant to give me, but it didn't hurt. It didn't hurt. So it's one of those things to where it's like, I don't know. I think I hyped myself up to where it's like, all right, I fucked up. He's going to stiff me, so just be ready for some shit. And I just think like whatever he gave me, I just took it like, okay, all right, cool. That was it.
Yeah.
But, you know, the match went good. The match went solid. But that was one of the things where like I unintentionally did something. And I'm like, oh, shit. Yeah, something's about to come my way pretty soon. And I apologize afterwards.
And of course, after you took it, you're like, oh, no, man, that really hurt. That was terrible, man. Yeah, yeah, man. This is good shit, man. Thanks for getting me. All right, you got me back. All right, it's done.
Yeah.
All right, brother. It's time for my favorite segment. It's time to take it home.
Oh, God.
The promoter has run out. He's pissed. He's screaming. It's time to take it home, brother. Here we go. Just some quick fire questions. Here it comes. Favorite move or hold that you don't use?
One that I don't use. I would have to say I do like the shooting star press. And in actuality, I practiced the move several times. I've done it. I'm not show ready yet. So that's kind of like one of those moves I'm still waiting to perfect. I don't like to post me practicing moves. Like if you can't do it during the show, you didn't do it at all. So yeah, I would say like the shooting star press.
Okay. I don't know if you noticed. I don't know if I'm pretty sure you know Chris Bay.
Yeah.
He has that video pinned on his Twitter of him practicing and the top rope breaks.
Oh yeah, I know.
Yeah. I'm like, damn, he gives no fucks. He's just like, here's me falling on my head.
Yo, and normally I would not laugh at that, but considering that he is still alive and not hurt, now I can laugh at it hilariously.
Yeah. Craziest fan interaction that you've had?
Man, yo, I was trying to think about this other day when I was watching the Luke interview. Man, I can't think of anything that's crazy. I will say I've had some situations where it's a bit odd. Like I went out to the ring one time in a match and a guy gave me a McDonald's cheeseburger. Like he just had it and he just handed it to me and I was like, oh shit, I got a cheeseburger. So took the cheeseburger in the ring. But but I mean that's mainly it. Like I haven't had any.
That's pretty weird. That's pretty weird.
No, I mean, it's thoughtful. It's very thoughtful. But it was one of those things where it's like, all right, I can't really eat this now, but thank you. You know, I don't think you drugged it, but
Yeah.
thank you.
What's the worst thing someone could do when you're working with them in a match? And I had to amend this question because the first few times it always does the same answer, which so except trying to hurt you. What's the worst thing someone could do?
Man, I would say try to make me look stupid. Yeah, it's really try to make me look stupid. Because what I've been taught is, and really we had this incident with one of our students at practice recently. If I'm doing a match and I'm trying to make a guy look great, I'm selling for him, but he can't do the same for me, or he's tripping over his leg, or he's messing up his moves, it's just time to beat the fuck out of him. It's not to say to take advantage of him, but who wants to watch a match where guys are tripping and falling on each other? That's not entertaining. Now, if you just see somebody just getting beat up, you might be like, "Oh snap, is this stuff real?"
Yeah.
Oh, wait, I gotta watch this. So it's one of those things. Like, if you're making me look stupid, like if you're trying to go for a hurricanrana and you can barely wrap your legs around me, or I'm trying to do a hurricanrana and you can't base, or you can't jump high for a leapfrog. It's like, all right, let's cut all this fancy stuff out. Let's get to that and go home.
Yeah. At that point, it's Vader time.
Yeah.
Start potatoing. The last time you were legitimately surprised by someone you were working with?
Man, legitimately surprised.
Or maybe amendings since you're a teacher, student that you had last time you were legitimately surprised by them.
Man, I would say it would, and if he's watching, I don't think he's watching this. Well, he might be watching this. But when I had to wrestle Saeed Abu Musa, which if anybody knows, that is our senior official at Wildkat Sports. The background story on Saeed is that he wanted to become a wrestler, but he was not good enough to be a good wrestler. He was much better at being a referee. So if you follow the background story of us, he cost me my title. It went on for months and months and months, and we finally had a match. We had two matches, actually. First match was a regular singles match, and then we had a submission match later on during the year. And that submission match, like going into the match, like the morning of, he kind of hurt himself a little bit, which was weird. He kind of pulled something in his groin or his stomach area or something. But when it came to showtime, he actually performed pretty well. He did not get in his head. He did not psych himself out. He followed instructions, and he did everything well. We've had practice matches with Saeed at practice, and he has the tendency of getting in his own head. But he performed great. I love the story that we told in our submission match because my hands were handcuffed behind my back. So I could not really lead the match because I can barely hold him. I couldn't hold him at all. But he did a very great job, and I was very proud of him for what he did, of his performance. And that was something to where I knew it was capable of him to do it, but the fact that he went through it so fluidly and safely, because I did not even get hurt, even though my hands are behind my back, I commend him for that.
Has a booker tried to stiff you on money?
No, but I've had some situations where like bookers were, "Hey, look, we'll PayPal you the money," and I'm like, "That's not what we discussed." So, like, what's going on? And I remember Luke had us booked for a show in what it was. He had us booked for Evolve. Yeah, no, it wasn't Evolve. It was FIP, which is kind of like Evolve's sister, smaller promotion. And we went out there and stuff, and we did the booking. And the thing is, when we got there, we was getting ready for pay. And he was like, "Oh, well, I told Luke I would PayPal y'all the money." And I'm like, "Hold up. This is why I don't like doing middlemen, because Luke didn't tell us this. I'm not saying you're wrong, but it's also to where it's like communications, the lines are getting blurred and stuff like that." So we got PayPal the money. But the thing is that my expectations at the time was cash, and his expectations at the time was PayPal. So it's one of those things where it's like, all right, we need to be on the same page next time. But other than that, no, I've never been stiffed out of the money. It was like, hey, instead of cash, can I PayPal you? I'm like, all right, we'll be waiting.
All right.
Be waiting on it.
Whether it be in a match you've been in or at any indie show that you just happen to be at, what's the hardest you've laughed at an indie show?
Man. All right, this isn't the hardest that I laughed because I couldn't really laugh too hard because I had to go out immediately and wrestle. So this was a match I had against Luke. It was at a Wildkat Sports show. This was our last match we had recently, last year. So leading into the match, if anybody's been following me like on social media and stuff like that, I've been calling Luke Hawx a rat for like the longest.
Mm-hmm.
I even did I did a hype video of me training for our match, and it's basically me beating up a rat in the process of me training. So what I did for that show was I went and got 300 copies of the rat emoji printed out on a piece of paper, and we passed out all those copies of the rat emoji paper to everybody in the audience. So, and this is a plan like I came up with, Matt came up with, Buku Dao came up with. So we had it to where when Luke came out for our match, Luke came out first. As soon as he walked out, everybody's holding up the rat emoji picture. And you can see like on his face, he was like, and then he sees like one of his friends and they're like holding it. He's like, yeah. And they have his face on the monitor behind the curtains. And I'm getting ready to go out next. And I'm looking at it. I'm like, I'm dying laughing, but I'm like, all right, I got to be angry. So I couldn't really like sit there and bask in it.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
Like, I'm looking at it. I'm like, this is perfect. Like I planned everything perfectly and it just hit. But like, as soon as my music hit, I'm like, all right, I'm angry. Because Saeed was coming out right after him. So I got to be upset with Saeed with him being in the ring. But that was the best. Like, I love that.
That's amazing. And Luke had no idea it was going to happen.
No idea. Everybody else knew. His son knew. Everybody else knew. I had the security guards passing out the flyers, and I had my friends passing out the flyers too. So everybody ringside had rat emoji pictures. And he just said, like who did this?
That must have been fantastic, especially because Luke, he has his mean mug face when he comes out, and I can't. And did it just break immediately?
It break. Like he came out like mean, and like, fuck is this? What is all this? And everybody's like, yeah.
Oh, I love that. Oh, that's amazing. Yeah. All right. That's good. Yeah, that's really good, especially because there's so much. Because I've seen, I follow you guys on, we're friends on Facebook, as I'm friends with Luke on Facebook. So I've been seeing that rat emoji for so long. That's why I'm. Oh my gosh. Anyway, out of all the, you work at different promotions, you see a lot of different workers. What's the worst gimmick that you've seen?
The Southern Stomper, Luke Hawx. That is the worst gimmick I have ever seen in my life. You have like a rat disguised as a human being pretending to wrestle. That is the worst gimmick. Second to Altar Boy Luke Hawx. That is the second worst gimmick I've ever seen. I don't know who in the hell like saw this little skinny kid and was like, yeah, we need to make you an altar boy. You need to come out in the robe and all that stuff. No, that's the worst gimmick I've ever seen. I don't know how it's still successful if you want to say that. The worst.
Oh my gosh. So besides the rat prank, any other pranks or good ribs that you remember seeing?
Yo, man, I didn't pull this prank off. We did a show in Maryland for MCW. That's the same promotion, the same wrestling school that Leo Rush comes from. Velveteen Dream, he comes from there too. So we did a show. It was me, Danny Flamingo, Socorro, Matt Lancey, Buku Dao, a bunch of Wildcat guys, and Johnny Flex. So we all mess with Johnny Flex. Love it. We always give him hell. It's almost kind of like a little brother type thing to where it's like, all right, let's rip this guy. Let's, give him a little bit of a hard time, but we do it with love. So one of the things when we get there, one of the trainers and the promoters, he's like, hey, look, y'all, I'm going to need to see y'all blood work for the commission. And so I'm like, all right, cool. I always keep my blood work with me because we need it in Louisiana. So I have it in my luggage. So he tells this to everybody. Everybody has it but Johnny Flex. So, and I noticed the promoter's coming up to me again. He's like, hey, man, you got your blood work? I'm like, yeah, I got it. I always got it. Now let me get back to my match, So he tells us to Johnny Flex, and Johnny Flex doesn't have it. So Johnny's on the phone. He's calling his grandfather. He's like, hey, look, man, can you take a picture of my blood work and send it to me? Gets the picture taken of it. Gives it to the promoter. Promoter's like, I can't see this stuff, man. Look, you're not on the show. If I can't see the blood work, you're not on the show. So he's freaking out. He calls his grandfather. He's like, hey, look, I need you to go to the clinic where I got the blood work done. I need you to get it faxed over here to them. Now, at this point, the promoter and some of the other wrestlers come up to us and they're like, yeah, man, so we're running this rib on him that if you don't have your blood work, you can't wrestle. And he hasn't shown us anything legible yet. So I'm like, oh, hey, y'all really fuck with him like this? Like, yeah, just keep going with it. So he tries to get it faxed over. He can't get it faxed over. So the promoter's like, well, it look like you're going to be working merchandise. And it's like, oh, man, I can't do this. Okay, and so he's bummed out. He's not talking to nobody. We're trying to get him to sell our merchandise. He's like, no, I don't want to do it. What the fuck you mean you don't want to sell our merchandise? Like, you can't wrestle, and it's your fault because you didn't bring your blood work. You should always, and I tell him, always keep it in your luggage. Always keep it in there. And it's like, man, I can't believe this. I don't want to say he's pouting. So this goes on for, I think, a good like 90 minutes. And then at some point, like the promoter's like, why you ain't got your gear on? It's like, I can't wrestle. It's like, oh, we was just ripping you about that blood stuff, man. Like, you need to get your gear on and get ready. You got a match coming up. And his whole face just drops. Like, he's like red and everybody's laughing at him. And I'm like, if you would have had your blood work, always keeping it, because you wrestle in Louisiana. So it's common sense to just keep it on you.
Yeah.
And if he would have had that, he never would have fell for the prank. So,
it's a roller coaster of emotions.
Yes. Oh, he was bummed. He was damn about to start crying and stuff.
Oh, man. All right. So I call this one the touchy-feely question. It's what is your pure joy in wrestling? Something that happens, whether it be before you have a match, when you're having a match, even when you're watching a match, something that happens where you get the goosebumps. You're like, this is why I love wrestling. This is why I still do it. This is what about it is about me. This is what this is.
Yo, honestly, it's weird. I don't really get the goosebumps until afterwards, until I'm like going over the match and I'm like replaying the crowd's emotion to what happened. But I love those moments where like you have like a vital story piece in the match. So, and just hearing the crowd play off of it. So for instance, I had like a match with Matt Lancey where I passed out during the match. Like literally he been bulldozing me for the match. Like he shot me off to go to like the other corner and I just collapsed. And you can kind of hear like the audience like, fuck is going on? There's another a match I had with Steve Anthony where I literally have, because I was feuding with Saeed, because Saeed kept costing me the match. I had like 5 referees come out to the ring to get Saeed out of the ring. And just that illusion of all the referees coming out to the ring and the whole crowd is like, what's going on? What's going on? And then Saeed gets into it with all 5 of the other referees. And we're trying to do like pinfalls. And so one referee slides in, Saeed pulls that referee out. You can hear the crowd going, oh! It's just that. That's like those vital story pieces. And that's not even big spots. But the crowd is so invested into the development of the story. It's like that really gives me goosebumps because it was kind of like my creation. So me having all these referees, and I had one of the referee, Odie, he was like, dude, I've never done nothing like this as a ref. So we have so many referees and we're all getting into it and we're all pulling each other out the ring. And the crowd loved it. I always go back to that. And that just kind of gives me goosebumps. So it's always like the aftershock of the match and the crowd reaction to the story pieces that always gets to me.
So it sounds like it's the payoff of crafting an idea and then seeing how it's received and how it comes.
Yo, it's like, if you watch Avengers, the minute that Captain America picks up the hammer and he starts whipping ass, you're like, oh, that's damn near the climax of it. Because like everything else is just built up to you. Like, oh man, this is just so good. This is just so good.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, sir, for being on the podcast. I appreciate it. Please plug the social media stuff, the Wildcat stuff, so everyone can check out your matches and everything like that.
Yes, you can reach me on Facebook at J Spade. That's the letter J dot Spade. Also on Instagram at Wildcard J Spade. Also have a YouTube channel. Just look up J Spade Wrestling. I have literally probably like over 30 matches on my YouTube channel. Also follow Wildkat Sports on Instagram and Twitter at Wildkat Sports. And on Facebook, just type in Wildkat Sports and it'll pop up.
Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you very much. Thanks.